Hey friends, software is everywhere, putting us devs on the front lines of innovation, improving people's lives, shipping new and better features, all while moving faster than ever before, which is where our friends at Raygun can help. Their powerful error and performance monitoring tools make it easy to get all the diagnostics you care about for your team's web and mobile apps. When there's an issue, it shows you exactly what's going on, who's being impacted, and how to fix the root cause, down to the specific line of code. See how your users are experiencing your website or app in real time and ship better code faster with confidence, knowing that Raygun will alert you to any new issues or regressions. Start a free 14-day trial of Raygun today and try it for yourself. It only takes a few lines of code, and their simple usage-based plans start at $4 a month, a small price to pay to get your team and users to love you. Visit raygun.com. Try it out. Thank me later. Hi, this is Scott Hansel, and this is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm talking with Alex Dunn. He's the founder of Enabled Play. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Scott.
So I have some mobility challenges. I've had frozen shoulder in both shoulders 3 times, multiple surgeries. I've used the Xbox assistive technology, which is almost like a technology kit. Everyone thought it was a controller because they saw the controller in 2 big buttons. And they're like, oh, I just hit the buttons. But the spectrum of ability is really a big, wide spectrum. Where do you see Enabled Play fitting into the spectrum of those things if we start with something obvious like an Xbox controller, which is the first thing people think about?
Yeah. So, Enabled Play was originally built for gaming, just like the Xbox adaptive controller. And, in the original prototypes that I started doing, I mostly focused on enabling sort of secondary commands to live alongside things like an Xbox controller or the Xbox adaptive controller. And Bryce Johnson from Microsoft, who's the co-inventor of it, has been a great mentor for me and sort of bouncing a lot of my ideas off as well. And in terms of sort of where it's landed now, it's something that, can offset a lot of the fast-paced primary actions required in a lot of modern games. And, my primary goal with it was not just to build another tool that's, in the tool belt and another cost, especially on people that need an assistive device to play games or to use their computer at all. But to give them a way to do the more complicated things faster. So to be able to participate and play games that are, competitive and fast-paced, things like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Call of Duty, Halo, stuff like that, and compete at sort of a higher level. So in terms of sort of where it sits, my primary goal was to work with folks that also use tools like Xbox Adaptive Controller and find out what else they could use to play their games. And beyond that, to, use their computers and other game consoles too. So it's powered by, voice commands that are all offline and real time and personalized, including support for nonverbal voice command sort of vowel sounds versus spoken sort of English or any language based words. Face expressions and body gestures. So raising your eyebrows to do something in game, opening your mouth, smiling, tilting your head different directions, moving and leaning side to side or back and forth. And then also using, your existing phone or tablet as a way to create inputs too, by creating hotkeys and sort of a digital controller, if you will, to do it sort of alongside that and create macros and automation and all that stuff, trying to sort of level the playing field for anyone with any level of ability. And, my sort of primary vision for it is to create a tool that's, adaptive in a way that really learns who you are and becomes a tool for you to use and understands the way that you prefer to use it, rather than what, a lot of other technology is, where it is what it is and you need to figure out how to adapt to it. I like to take the sort of other angle and create a personalized input device.
So there's a whole lot to unpack in there, and I want to pull out 4 or 5 different things individually in what you just said.
Sure.
To start with, it seems to me like for a long time, putting together play enablement for folks that have a challenge has been Rube Goldbergian. It's been auto hotkey macros and X input tools and weird things that you download from backwards corners of the internet to make things act like they are Xbox controllers and faking X inputs. And it's all, and Rube Goldberg, for those who don't know, used to build ridiculous contraptions where the mouse would go down and the bowling ball would hit the thing and it would bounce and it would work a couple of times, but you need to work reliably. How is this not that? How is this a reliable and something I can count on?
Yeah, so there's a couple things to, I guess, unpack there. The first is, I totally agree, right? A lot of assistive devices require a bunch of custom built pieces and controls, and you got wires all over the place. One of my users used to use what are called twitch controls, which is essentially it's an actual electronic sensor that you stick to a muscle, and if that muscle twitches, then it would trigger something. And when they wanted to play games, they would have stickers all over their face with wires coming out of them. And those can plug into something like an Xbox adaptive controller in order to actually turn them into inputs. But, for me, it was like, that's kind of insane that was something someone had to do. And actually beyond that, they had to have someone else do it for them because they didn't have gross or fine motor abilities in their arms and hands. So they had literally someone putting stickers on them anytime they wanted to play a game. So from my point of view, it was let you use what you have. And instead of requiring tons of hardware and tons of customized controls, it's using software to customize and personalize to you, doing AI on the edge rather than trying to stream it to cloud services. So you get a lot of real-time performance. One of the big things with voice commands that I focused on in terms of reliability is enabling, pun always intended, the ability to do that automatic speech recognition in a predictive manner directly on the edge on the device itself, or even if you're using a light controller directly on your phone or tablet to use as an alternative microphone, which means there's no time spent doing pre-recording, streaming that audio to a cloud service or to any custom server that's going to actually run the recognition model, then stream it back and then figure out, here's what you said, what should that be for an input? It's more of a sort of just straight sound to USB is sort of the way I like to think about it. So in terms of reliability, it supports offline. It also supports remote and online too, if you want to do things from a sort of distributed manner. And it's something that gets personalized to you over time and you have absolute control over it.
So when I think about these tools that I was mentioning before, it was a bunch of little applets and a bunch of hard to configure text files. When I plug a Enable Play controller appliance, either the Enable Play or the Enable Play Lite, it shows up as what? It's a HID, a human interface device. Yep. It's a keyboard. It's a mouse. It's a what?
Yeah, so it's a triple input HID device. So it registers as a keyboard, mouse, and gamepad. So the gamepad is, a controller for those that aren't familiar with the technical term for it. Mm-hmm. And so when you start to use it, you can choose from the app side, which then sends the configuration to the device itself, what type of input is going to create what type of output. So you can do things like press a key or press a button or click mouse left button or mouse right button, or move your mouse in a certain direction, a certain number of pixels, or move a joystick in that amount as well, and combine all those things together. And you can use them because it is just another input device on platforms that support multiple input devices, especially right alongside it. So you can still use a keyboard, you can still use, an existing controller and basically offset it, or you can use it as your primary device too.
It seems like some things have changed in the last 5, maybe 10 years around standardization of HIDs, standardization of devices, such that you can get away with a lot fewer drivers and you can plug something in and it can pretend to be effectively an Xbox controller, a two stick appropriate, correct number of buttons. Is that true?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the without the sort of standardization of HID, things like this would be a challenge for supporting multiple operating systems, consoles, PCs, and even Macs too, Chromebooks, even Linux boxes. Without a standard around it, you end up having to create a device that can instead read what type of device it was plugged into and then try to adapt the right output to send it. And that's really challenging to do. And you need to pack a lot more business logic into the device firmware itself, or, install a bunch of specific drivers for specific platforms. So with the standardization, you take an Enable Play controller, you plug it into a PC, great. You take it out, you go plug it into an Xbox, great. You leave, if you're a student, you go to school, plug it into a Chromebook. And it works the same, no matter what it's plugged into. And those standards have been extremely helpful. And it's also made my life way easier as a developer where, I just worry about my firmware and it works on any platform. And then I build my apps around that to control the device too.
Okay. So visualizing, since we're on a podcast here, I have this little black box.
Yep.
And I plug it in to the USB on one of my devices, any device, and that's the left side.
And then the right side is whatever I choose to plug into the Enable Play controller, both physically or virtually, or pairing it with a phone or anything.
Right. So basically, you download the app. It's on iOS and Android right now. We'll have, depending on when you're listening to this, it may already be on Mac and Windows too, but it'll be out later this summer on those platforms. But you use that to configure it over Bluetooth or over USB, and then everything is managed either over a WebSocket connection once it's sort of validated and verified for your account, and you give it Wi-Fi access, or over, again, USB and HID as well into the device through its own USB ports, or over Bluetooth Low Energy. So basically any type of input you want, you can use. But also, there's the microphones for voice commands are on the device itself. So any of the spoken commands, the only thing you're sending it is to say, hey, please start listening or stop listening. Everything else, is actually happening on the device. Things like expression controls using your face or body gestures or those hotkeys, those are then the things that are going to go over Bluetooth or WebSockets, essentially.
So expression controls, I want to raise my eyebrows and I want to have my character jump. I've got my phone paired with the Enable Play controller.
Right.
It's got the camera happening. The app recognizes so that was done on the edge. It didn't send video of me up to the cloud.
Right, exactly.
That tells the Enable Play controller, that's command 1 or whatever I've decided to map it to, which could then be anything, keyboard, mouse, controller, or any combination of those, whatever it takes to get my person to jump.
Exactly, right. So that could be a space bar, that could be the A button, that could be a trigger, that could be moving your mouse, or that could be a mouse click, or you can chain all of those together, even across those different device types, right?
Well, there's difficult things like it's like you might say jump up and down, but these games mean I need to run, sprint, hold the left trigger, and then jump, and then double click for one of those Mario double jumps.
Yep.
That's a pretty sophisticated and very timing intensive thing. I can make that a single eyebrow.
Exactly. One eyebrow raise. The most common one that I use personally is in Elden Ring. And if you're not familiar with playing Elden Ring with a controller,
oh my goodness,
it is notorious for you having to do the claw move, right? So you got to use your joysticks to be moving because you're likely running away from someone. Then you have to hit Y if you're on an Xbox controller, triangle if you're on a PlayStation controller, and then like a right trigger all at the same time, right? So you're moving your camera joystick, your character move joystick, you're hitting the wire triangle, and you're hitting a trigger just to like two-hand a weapon or to get on your mount and run away. Those things I just make like I smile and I get on my mount, or dismount, I just toggle it. Or I just say like do a heavy attack and while I'm running, so I can do a run and hold the right trigger the entire time all at once, and like perfectly timed too.
Elden Ring, man, I'm level 139, 140, and
nice.
I suck. We suck so badly. And there's so many maneuvers where you have to like claw with the left hand while holding B while trying to run. And it's like, why would you
it's brutal.
do that to somebody? Oh my goodness. Okay. So you know what this feels like to me, and I think that there's a small niche of people who will understand this analogy. This is Home Assistant for enabled assistive technology.
Yeah, totally right. Right. It's sort of any input to any output, right? Just like Home Assistant is going to be your hub for your smart home stuff. And locally on the edge too. For those that don't know Home Assist,
there's like three people who like get that analogy. But it kind of works though, doesn't it? I mean, it's a complete engine. It's like if this, then that. When we see these kind of workflow systems like Microsoft Flow, it's you can go into the app and then you visually say what you want to have. You don't have to code anything. There's no YAML files. It's just I want to do this thing and I want it to map to that. And then you have profiles per context, per game or whatever.
Yep, exactly. You can share those profiles with, a couple taps, send them to your friends. So like if I build a great Elden Ring one and I'm like, Scott, I figured it out. We can easily do our heals and get on our mount and run away and attack with these types of voice commands. I'll just send it to you and you can take it, but then you can personalize it from there too. Or, like even beyond that is, some of the stuff I've been doing more recently is actually partnering with game developers and other software developers to sort of create the official profiles for what they're building. Right. And it's so simple to build a profile, but doing something that from scratch, I guess, it can be daunting. If you're like, okay, I'm going to use, let's say Visual Studio, right? There's a million things you can do in Visual Studio. But if you started with, look, we've got everything, with voice commands, and we've also got some pre-builts for expressions to do things like build or create a new file or things like that. Then I can take that and get started right away and then customize from there. rather than having to really start from scratch, which is, I think, the real power behind profiles. It's not something you have to build over and over and over again. It's something, if someone's figured it out, we can get it shared, we can get it out to you, and build a sort of ecosystem of these different, tools and across all these different platforms to make everything more accessible.
See, now I need a voice command for enabled play where I can go, Leroy, and it'll roll out of the way, jump and sprint, and just directly into battle. And again, 4 people will get that reference on the show, but that's okay. We don't mind. Built for structured logging, Seek lets you filter and exclude events by type, search by event properties, build dashboards, and configure alerts in seconds. Seek helps you troubleshoot and resolve issues more efficiently than ever before. Available as a simple Windows installer or Docker image, try Seek for free now at datalust.co/seq. That's datalust.co/seq. So when did you figure out that this was going to be bigger than just controlling games? Because this could be accessibility for computers in general. You could build a whole ecosystem that has nothing to do with play.
Yeah, exactly.
Enabled life.
I really almost regret calling it enabled play, because, you can enable anything, but of course enabled.com is definitely a taken domain. So that's going to be a little too difficult. But, the moment I found out, I was actually speaking at a conference and sharing the use cases in gaming at KCDC. Shout out KCDC. If you haven't been there, it's one of the best developer conferences there is in the US. And I was giving my talk about it, and I had actually a number of people reach out to me and be like, hey, my employer is trying to create a more inclusive environment for people with disabilities to actually be productive in the work they're doing in the office or at home. Is this something that could work for that? And, my answer right away was like, how did I not think of this? Of course it can. And I think the even more impactful one came from a couple people that reached out at the same conference and said, hey, my school district is actually trying to do something to make computer science more accessible in the CTE or career training education programs more accessible. Because right now, students in special education programs basically don't get to participate in their computer labs or in computer science classes or in any of these CTE programs. And so in starting to discuss things with groups like different state departments of education, different school districts, speech therapists, occupational therapists, what I learned was that this problem is so much deeper than gaming. And it's actually creating sort of compounding issues right now, where we introduce technology at younger and younger ages to kids, especially in the US and in Europe. And the problem with doing that is that if technology is just straight up not accessible or inclusive to everyone, those students who don't get to participate, whether that's because of a disability, whether that's lack of funding in their area, their school simply not having that technology, it means they actually fall behind in our sort of modern technology society at an accelerated rate, because everyone else is moving forward at an accelerated rate. And if you're sort of paused or just sort of move slower, that's the biggest challenge. I tweeted a couple things out during Global Accessibility Awareness Day around, sort of an anonymous version of some of the stories of my users in schools, where, students going through and learning how to type for the first time, and a student having hand tremors, making it so that they can't type as fast as their fellow students, or a student with dyslexia trying to write a research paper and having to take up to 10 to 20 times as long as their fellow students and getting a worse grade because there's things like typos. And, they had a challenge reading the research papers that they had to use as primary sources. And those are things that, are sort of hidden from us as developers a lot until you see it with sort of first person with a student. And so a big part of my focus lately has been on, enabling students to actually participate in computer science classes in their computer labs from elementary school all the way up, get into STEM programs where they couldn't before. And even beyond that, for students, that don't live with a disability or aren't going through a special ed program, to be able to also build on top of the platform to create custom programs that work with Enable Play for their fellow students, and not just helping the individual, but also teaching students getting into coding and into programming that there's value in building technology that actually helps people. And that's really what we should be doing. That's the whole point of technology, is to solve problems. So that's been, a big part of my focus. I know it was a really long-winded answer to like, when did you find out that it's more than gaming? But that's, I guess, some of the details of it. Most of it came out of KCDC when I first started talking about gaming, and so many people being like, are you crazy? There's way more to this. And there's even more, beyond that. as I continue to learn, work with people, build, user testing groups and try to understand more of the problems that Enable Play can help solve.
Yeah, your demo, you had a Twitter, on your Twitter enabled play, you had an example where you were coding with your voice inside of Visual Studio Code, and then you had Copilot behind that. So you were making code comments to describe what you wanted verbally as your intent. Mm-hmm. And then Copilot, of course, can get you, 90% there with basic stuff. That's going to enable coding for a whole community of folks. So then let me ask you this. There's going to be people who may have made it 20 minutes into our podcast, and they might say, well, this is all fun, but I don't have anything wrong with me.
Right.
So why do I care? And what I would say was that I didn't think there was anything wrong with me until I couldn't move my arms above my head. And then suddenly I couldn't use a mouse. So we're all going to eventually have different changes in ability, but I'm curious what your answer is.
Yeah, there's a couple, there's two sides to it, I think. One is, there's around 20% of adults in the U.S. that have a disability. Compare that to around 6.2% of kids with disabilities in the U.S. Well, that's a big jump of people who developed a physical disability along the way due to either injuries or disease or disorders that weren't discovered while they were kids or anything in between. It's something that can happen to anyone. And it's something that, we don't really, as developers, often enough sort of attack as a problem. The other side of it is, Enable Play isn't just assistive technology. It's not just for people that live with a disability. For example, I can talk a whole lot faster than you can code, and Copilot is probably going to guess that a lot faster. I actually did a fun little speed test of that, that sample that you mentioned of sort of dictating what I wanted to code versus someone actually trying to write it from scratch. I knew it was over 4 times faster. Or how about like just all the different shortcuts and things you need as a developer, right? Like just saying it or doing a face expression to get it is a huge value. Productivity with macros and automation and all these different inputs. And now you've got multiple inputs at the same time, your face, your hands, your voice. When you get really proficient in that, it's insane how fast you can move.
I tell you, people don't realize that people who know me personally, who text me, know that 99% of all of my text messages, my Teams messages, my emails have been dictated. That's because of hand mobility issues, but also because I'm freaking fast. And once you learn how to do and actually I caught myself today talking to a friend who I had been texting, and they got tired of texting, so they called me. And then I was like, well, how's it going, Ashley, good to hear from you, ! But I said it out loud. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Because you get that in your mouth, you know what I mean? But you're really efficient. And then when Windows added the Windows hotkey, Windows H, I dictate all of my emails, but I don't have any way to set up any kind of macros, but I could with Enable Play.
Exactly. You can go from what I think is like a really interesting tool is mixing dictation and the sort of commands at the same time. So the way that sort of works specifically with Enable Play is like when you build a profile, you can, one, of course, give like the different commands for the different types of macros you want to run or the different, inputs you want to create. But then you can also choose the sort of commands that are going to start dictation mode. So going back to that video that you mentioned that I posted on Twitter, I was saying, comment XYZ or comment and type XYZ to write it out. But you can actually do things like say comment and have it write, // or pound, depending on what language you're in, and then just dictate. And then once you sort of get to the end of a statement, it'll stop and sort of reset, and you'll know it's finished when it typed everything out, and you can go right back to issuing commands in the middle of dictation too.
Ooh, that's cool. Because really cool. I feel like when I'm doing dictation, there is always that moment where it's like, okay, I'm done. And then I have to push the dictation button again. So a lot of my long form things are push the dictation button, go until it's either tired of me or it times out, and then push it again. And a lot of that is a lot of toggling between modes. I feel like AI should be smart enough to know that, which brings me to my next question, that this isn't just a macro in a box system. You're putting AI behind it, which really hasn't been done, historically with assistive technologies. What kind of things can we enable with a little more smarts behind it?
Yeah, so there's really two sides to the AI on the edge with Enable Play. The first is just running, face and body detection with computer vision on the edge, and the other is speech recognition. But one of the things that's not, apparent when you just look at what it does is how it's actually learning on the fly from what you're saying and what you're doing. So for example, if you say jump, jump, jump to jump 3 times, and I say jump, jump, jump to jump 3 times, we're going to sound a little different. And for people with a quote unquote, I hate this, but it's the sort of, normalized term, a regular speech pattern when it comes to speech recognition, it'll work fine. But if you don't have that regular or normalized speech pattern, if you have even just an accent, saying jump in a lot of speech recognition won't recognize you. But with Enable Play, it's starting to basically pick up on your speech pattern and prefer those things. And it's training that on the fly based off of basically surrounding words, context, repetition. And it's also learning things to be able to do predictive movements, like every time you move left and right to do like a body gesture or something like that, it can predict your momentum as how far you're going and actually move your mouse ahead of time. So you get even smoother mouse movement. Or it can do things like predict the different types of commands you're going to create based on your profile and the typical way that you mix and match things like voice commands and expressions too. And it's not just executing AI on the edge, it's also doing sort of small training and learning as well.
That's really huge for this thing to get smoother and smoother, because if you just loaded a Midwestern or West Coast American accent and just, got your standard voice recognition thing off the shelf, people who I have demoed my dictation success with have said, well, that's great because you're from Oregon and you sound like a newsreader. But for the, but for the rest of us,
yep. Right.
Dictation doesn't work. Even for my wife, who has a hybrid accent, voice recognition has been very challenging for her. And if you were just going, and that means
yep.
jump.
Yep.
You want that to work instantly. And I don't want to go, and then wait.
Yeah.
For the cloud to figure it out.
Exactly. Speaking of the sort of to jump, that nonverbal speech recognition is something I haven't seen before and had to do a lot of work into figuring out, especially, like in education for folks that are nonverbal. Communication is obviously extremely difficult, right? There's certain programs and apps, and you sort of, like you mentioned before with other assistive technology, mix and match and put those tools together. But there's nothing that should be stopping speech recognition from understanding different just audio sounds. And actually, I was just turned on to this research paper around different tongue positions for people that have paralysis in their face, to be able to do basically 9 different vowel sounds and turn that into a joystick. And I didn't even really think about it that way, but essentially predicting your different tongue positions using purely your audio and the same exact type of technology that normal speech recognition uses, but doing that training on the fly, building it for people that don't have that regular speech pattern, and building something that's just able to learn. AI on the edge is getting a lot easier now. There's a lot of new tools. There's even better hardware coming out soon too, which is extremely exciting. That, pun again intended, enables developers to even do a lot more with AI and solve even more problems. And that's most of what my research is focused on, and just applying it with Enable Play.
Yeah, I've been learning a lot about this as I was dealing with my own mobility issues. I kind of somehow TikTok figured me out, and as TikTok does, and starts showing me other folks with other challenges. And I've somehow stumbled onto a dystonia community with folks with, various facial palsies or TIAs, transient ischemic attacks, or stroke victims. Everyone is unique. And the idea that one AI model would work for everyone is just silly. Right. It needs to be on the edge, meaning on the device itself, and it needs to get smarter every time you use it.
Yeah, or at the very least, if you're not ready to start, implementing things like training AI on the edge, like at least build something that's personalizable and manageable in settings. I mean, for example, with Enable Play, like learning expressions is something that it can do on the fly, but it can also start from a place that's personalized by just changing your settings. Like if, for example, you have a mobility issue in your neck and you want to use head tilting or turning, but you can only turn your head to the left so far, and you can turn your head to the right even farther, but you want to use those for sort of mouse controls or something like that, you can go in and change your settings so that I only have to move my head left. I sort of turn on like a higher sensitivity. So I only have to move it left very slightly within, a single to 5 degrees radius from the sort of baseline that you started at. And also just, a really cool thing that it does is basically bases all of the machine learning that it's running on the edge for prediction based on your resting position. So if you want to just throw your phone, against your laptop or against, even just on your desk, if it can see your face, it can start to monitor the changes in it too, rather than having to be something that's perfectly aligned, dead center, like a lot of like head mouse controls and things like that are, and be something that just figures out where you are, what you can do, and sort of go from there.
Forgive me, but do you have a master's or a PhD in computer science? Are you a classically trained computer person? You seem to have such a clear understanding about how to build large systems like this.
So I went to Worcester Polytechnic Institute for 1 year and then dropped out at 18. Since then, I've basically just been working in industry. So I've worked in big agencies. I've worked with a number of Fortune 500 customers. That's where I learned a lot of things like the enterprise scale of cloud development and on application development and how to apply AI for business problems. I sort of then moved into more on the product side and running teams and more focused on understanding people's problems, whether that's a personal problem or a business problem and sort of applying the latest technology. But for me, it's, I guess semi-traditional. I studied computer science for a year, but, I started learning how to code when I was very young. I was around like 10 or 11, which is where my handle Suave Pirate came from. It was from a name generator I wrote as a kid to sort of use to get into my professional internet space, because Alex Dunn is a very ordinary name that at the time was very hard to find on the internet. To find me, even if you're like, oh, the Alex Dunn who works in like Microsoft technology, there's 2 or 3 Alex Dunn developers at Microsoft. So like, I'm not coming up first.
But the only Suave Pirate is
right. The only Suave Pirate, you'll find me. So yeah, it's been a mix. I mostly learned from contributing to open source, building projects. I learned personally by building things and talking with others and just trying to build with empathy first. So understanding what someone's problem is or what a business's problem is, and just, bringing the solution to life to solve that problem.
So how can folks support Enabled Play and get involved other than visiting enabledplay.com and clicking on shop?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways. We have a few different partnership programs for gaming education in the workplace. So, for example, if you are working in the education space and want to find ways to use the device and the platforms and the profiles and everything else to make technology more accessible for students, we have a partnership program you can learn about on the website. If you work in accessibility in gaming, especially, a number of nonprofits like Special Effect or Able Gamers or Warfighter Engaged, those are the folks that we partner with as well to help use the devices. Or if you're an employer who's just wanting to be able to create a more inclusive environment or a more productive environment for people using technology, then there's ways to contribute there. Become a partner as well and learn how to get the most out of the devices and platform. And then we're also going to be announcing more officially a little bit later a developer platform for folks to be able to integrate, whether that's things like automatically switching profiles or creating profiles for your own software, or even creating new inputs that can be used by different people to sort of feed into that hub and spoke model of what the Enabled Play devices are. So there's more on that coming later this year. But there is a sort of early access sign up as well on the website.
Very cool. Well, this is fantastic. I appreciate your time and all of your efforts. And I'm sure that folks of all different abilities appreciate the work that you're doing. Folks can check you out at enabledplay.com, both on the website and on Twitter. We've been chatting with Alex Dunn, founder of enabledplay.com. And this has been another episode of Hansel Minutes. And we'll see you again next week.